Welcome to Bookish Talk. This is the show that encourages and enlightens bookish reading and empowers aspiring authors to write and publish their fiction or nonfiction story. I'm Paula Shepard, and I am honored to co-host this show with my partner and author of 10,000 Miles with My Dead Father's Ashes, Devin Galaudet. I can't pronounce your name. It's been a week, and I still am tongue-tied. How was Costa Rica? How was the wedding?
We're married for the 26th time, and I have shaved a little bit anyway. It's wonderful to see your smiling face, Paula.
Yeah, I almost didn't recognize you with all that clean shavenness. Well, today we have two empowering authors here at Bookish. Sherri Leopold, who is a mentor, a speaker, and CEO of Dream Big with Sherri Leopold, and leader of the Stop Self-Bullying movement. We have Martin Lopez, who is a trainer and coach and author of the book, The Curiosity Theory. So by the end of this show, our hope is that all of our viewers will be inspired to read a book outside of their comfort zone and take the very first step in writing their fiction or nonfiction book outline.
I think that is an incredible goal, which we're going to just keep striving for every week. Paula, today our virtual library background is of the James B. Hunt Jr. Library. James Baxter Hunt Jr. is an American politician and retired attorney. Snøhetta, which is an integrated design company out of Norway, which worked closely with NC State U libraries to set a new benchmark for technology, sophisticated collaborative learning spaces with the design of the new Hunt Library. It serves both as North Carolina's second main library and the intellectual and social heart of the university's Centennial campus. It has generous open spaces connecting all floors of the library, and open stairs emphasize an interactive and social environment alongside more focused study areas. Disruptive learning colors with spaces, dynamic furnishing exist adjacent to more traditional study rooms. The Tech Showcase allows users to experiment with new technology and borrow the latest electronic devices. Staff areas are consolidated on one floor rather than dispersed in clusters on each floor. Technology zones are integrated throughout the library as well. Interactive digital surface and high-definition video display screens deliver both programmed and live feed information. Paula? And we can't hear you, Paula.
That's typically not a problem for me. So let's resolve that. Hopefully you can hear me loud and clear now. I'm really in awe of these libraries every week. And it's inspiring me. You've done your 26th wedding. And I'm thinking maybe there needs to be an excursion to visit all of the libraries that we're talking about and be there in person. It's really interesting. I want to shift for a minute here because we have been talking a lot about genres. And previously, Devin, you answered a question about blended genre and reminded us that by definition, genres to some extent really is kind of following a formula of some semblance and kind, and that readers really admit to being comforted by knowing what that formula is. Genre fans turn to their books for a particular kind of escape, whether it's solving a mystery, becoming lost in another world, or wanting to feel swept away in a romance. So our call to action is when choosing a genre, we are catering to our readers. So keep that intention in mind. We recommend going back and watching last week's episode 9 at e360tv.com. Devin, I have another question for you. After I choose the genre for my book, do I have to have a book outline?
So, well, it's a yes or no, yes and no kind of answer. When you begin writing your book, creating an outline is a structured document that plans out and put sequence for the information that you're going to be including in your book. It's the skeleton. It is what is the chronological order. It is, well, the outline. And it will be used as the roadmap while you write. Your book's outline is the agenda of what it is that you want to say. It'll include the main points or the events that you'll write about in your book. If you want to build a house, we're going to use a blueprint. In football, I'm not a huge football fan, but the coach is going to put together a game plan. The outline is your game plan for the book. It is sort of like the same purpose that will guide you so you can follow along as the writer and kind of get from start to finish. So the no part of what I was talking about is that you don't necessarily have to do that, but you should have some outline somewhere in your book just to keep you focused. In other words, as an example, you may not have like an outline of your book, but you may want to have, and I highly recommend this, certainly if you're writing fiction, is to have an outline of your characters. In other words, know who they are, allow them to react in ways that they should in accordance to their personality. Because when a character sort of like does something that's way out of character, the reader is going to acknowledge that. And so there has to be answers to why certain kinds of things occur. Otherwise, it starts becoming an unreliable read for your readers. So to continue on, a book outline is essentially the same for, conceptually speaking, for both fiction and nonfiction books. But the outline format can vary depending upon genre. A fiction novel will include important storytelling points, such as structure, plot, scenes, and characters. A nonfiction book will include important informational aspects such as topic concepts, and intentional information sort of, in the architecture of the read itself. I actually brought mine today. I have 2 books on here. I'm not going to go into all of the details of it. I tend to use Post-it notes and information. So each one of those blocks represents a different important focal point of my book. I'm going to go into a little bit more about that next week. Paula?
My eyes just lit up if you didn't see that, my whole face, because I love Post-it notes. So being that way is really exciting to me.
So you said you did choose your genre, Paula. Have you started your outline yet?
I did. I sort of did. And I have Post-it notes on a wall. So probably not quite as organized as what you have, but my outline really just looks like notes on Post-its, and I'm moving them around and being a little less rigid about where I feel like things need to go, because I tend to be a very organized person and I don't want to get myself caught up in this is how it has to be. I really want it to feel like a very natural flow of my thoughts on the page.
And by the way, that's exactly what you want your book line to be. You want it to be something that is going to add to the process and make it easier for you rather than more difficult. So what that means ultimately is that some authors are not going to use a book outline. However, for those who want to use one, here's 5 benefits that may help a writer get the job done. So number 1, write quickly. With a book outline, you will know exactly what you have to write about. However, there's howevers through all of this. Writing quickly isn't necessarily a good thing. Sometimes writing slowly and taking your time will help allow new ideas to come to the forefront. However, again, writing a little bit more quickly is still some benefit to some writers. Number 2, intentional structure. Although an outline is equally applicable to nonfiction and fiction, an outline can help you create a solid structure for your novel. This can result in a better quality piece of literature. Number 3, overcome the blank page syndrome. My guess is most new writers go through a process where they're looking at the blank screen, the blank page, and it's like, well, where do I start? An outline will help you get to that first page and the first writing. So it doesn't have to be as sort of like as dreaded, because we create these little monsters in our mind. And sometimes it's very easy to look at a blank page and create a little monster in your mind of how are you going to continue to write, or how are you going to get started. So the outline will kind of help take away the daunting aspect of it when you sit down, and you'll be able to kickstart your writing with an outline. Also, one of the things, or one of the tips that I've had, so this is sort of like a 3A, is that you don't have to write everything out. In other words, let's say you sit down for a writing session and you're writing, and everything's wonderful, and you write, like, let's say you know that you're going to write about Jimmy kissing Susie in the cloakroom, whatever. So you're going to have that scene, and you know that you want to have this interaction between these two people. You don't have to complete the whole scene. If there's some sort of like a memorable note right before the end of that scene, don't write it, and then start with that and then move forward on the next thing. So you don't write yourself so the gas tank is empty. I think a lot of writers experience that. Number 4, prevent writer's block. Now, I have to say, my humble opinion, I don't think writer's block is really a thing. I think it's frequently just like, I don't want to write today. And then, well, I'm having writer's block. Just force yourself to get that first sentence out, or maybe that first paragraph, and you'll find that you'll start getting back into the flow. But if you are one of those people like, no, Devin, you're completely wrong. I have writer's block. I completely get it. We all are doing our own thing as best we can. Having said that, having an outline can help you eliminate writer's block, because you open your outline and there you have the next piece to start writing on. It's like jump starting your brain. Number 5, push through the sagging middle, which is kind of a point when you're connecting key ideas, but these connections within themselves may not be the most compelling components to your story. And for some people, that's a difficult thing, but that's why we have sort of like rough drafts and finishing drafts and things like that. So we know that just get the ideas out. And even if it's like in your brain, a sagging middle, don't worry about it. Know that you will spruce it up and fix it as time goes on. If you are writing a novel, you are no doubt familiar with this uphill battle of writing the sagging middle. With a carefully constructed outline, it becomes easier. This said, there is a downside to focusing too much on your outline. Don't be too rigid, meaning you want, especially if you're writing a novel, you want your characters to kind of have the freedom to move about and have spontaneous ideas spring up in you. And you should be able to go there even if it goes against your outline. So just give yourself some flexibility. Don't hold on to things too tightly, and give yourself some joy. Allow yourself to play. That's part of the magic and the art of writing. I encourage our viewers to watch episodes 1 to 9. That's an undertaking, but it's worth it, because next week I will dive a little bit more into how I put together my outline, so you'll have your own template.
Amazing. I can't wait for that. Well, before we go to break, where you're going to hear writing tips from best-selling authors Stephen King, John Grisham, and J.K. Rowling, I want to let you know that Bookish Talk is sponsored by Pivot Point School. So if you're pivoting from employment to entrepreneurship, they will point you in the right direction. Visit thrivingwomennetwork.com and learn all about their 10-week online course on how to write a business plan and receive your license and certification as a financial coach. Spring semester starts April 28th. When we come back from break, we'll see you at the Writer's Corner, the Author's Corner.
I normally start writing a novel on January the 1st of each year. That's my ritual, with the goal of finishing the book in 6 months and being done, in July. And that's been the schedule for the past probably 10 or 15 years. When I'm writing, which is usually, that time of the year, I get a lot of writing done in January, February, and March for obvious reasons. So it's a good time to write. When I'm writing, it's 5 days a week. I start around 7 each morning in my office. The routine rarely varies. It's pretty structured. It's the same spot, same computer. So the office is a separate building with no phones, faxes, or internet, because I don't want the distraction. And I don't work online. I keep it offline. It's the same cup of coffee, the same type of coffee, the same everything. And the hours between 7 and 10 are, that's the best time of the day for me. It's very productive. On a good day, I'll write probably 2,000 words. A slow day is probably 1,000. There aren't many slow days because by the time I start a book, I have a very good idea of where it's going. I don't start a book. I don't write the first scene until I know the last scene. And that's a rule I've kept for 25 years. I just don't start at something unless I know where it's going to go. So once I do start it, there aren't many down days.
We are back. Oh my gosh, that was the shortest commercial ever. Hey, everybody. So excited about this next segment because I just love this person that we have, on our show, this next one, Martin Lopez. I met Martin about 5-6 years ago, and the relationship has just continued to foster, through this time. So welcome to the Author's Corner. I'm Lynda Sunshine West, one of your co-hosts here on Bookish. We hope you're really enjoying this show and getting a lot out of it, meeting these incredible people on the journey. Now, our mission here at Bookish is to encourage, enlighten, and empower 5 million aspiring authors to write and publish their book, their first book, second, fifth, 10th, whatever. We're here to inspire you to do that. So we're honored to have 2 published authors today. Who we have with us right now, though, is Martin Lopez. He's an author, a trainer, and a coach. And Martin's book, The Curiosity Theory, which you got to check it out, it's absolutely amazing, is a powerful methodology that radically changes the way we look at life and the way that we look at ourselves and the way we look at each other. So the Curiosity Theory gives people the alternatives during tense and stressful situations, which we all experience those. This Curiosity Theory, though, is going to help you to tap into those and get through those stressful situations a lot faster. So, Martin, we're so excited to have you here on Bookish Talk, and we'd love for you to share with us, the name of the book is The Curiosity Theory, but how did you choose the genre for the book, and what was behind your passion and purpose in you becoming a published author?
Wow, that's a huge question. How did I pick the genre? I got in a fight with my ex-wife is how I picked the genre. It was kind of just a silly argument that we got into over where to go out for dinner on a Friday afternoon. And I write every day, and I was journaling, and I just turned that night after we worked everything out, I took that journaling into a book and just turned it into a book. And it was an important thing because it was my marriage, it was my family, so it was worth exploring, and it was worth writing about.
Martin, of course, thank you for being here. What I'm interested in knowing is that many authors at one point or another felt that their story wasn't important enough to write or complete, or had a lot of self-doubt. Was that something that you experienced? And if so, how did you overcome that hurdle?
Well, I experienced self-doubt in other things. In the writing, it was fairly easy because I had somebody help me, and he's very accomplished. So I did, my courage or my what would you say that my strength really came from the person that helped me write, what do you call him, a ghostwriter.
Well, that's fantastic. And how did you find a ghostwriter that was a fit for you? Because that's something that, first of all, a ghostwriter, for those who don't know, is a person who behind the scenes does the work, and then your name is out there shining bright as can be, right? They're usually in the background. That's why it's called a ghostwriter. So how did you choose a ghostwriter? How did you know which one was going to be the right fit for you?
Wow. For me, it was completely by accident. And matter of fact, the first sentence of my book is, have you ever got out of a fight by accident? So it was one of those great accidents. I was giving a speech. I was telling the story about what had happened on that Friday night with my wife, Yvette. And so there was somebody in the audience and said that would be a really great book. I wrote speeches for senators and congressmen and politicians. I'd love to see if you're interested in making a book. I'd love to talk to you about that. And I was like, yeah, sure, And that's what happened. So completely by accident. And it was the writer came to me, and he was a friend of mine.
That makes it even better because you have that relationship.
Yeah.
I do have a question, totally off topic here.
Yeah.
We see you got some guitars back there, and then you have that word yum. I know your story, so I know what this means, but just in case anybody's looking right now, because that's part of your book, The Curiosity Theory. So why don't you share with us what that yum means in the background there?
Well, the curiosity theory is a version of emotional intelligence. And so for men, I have 2 sons. And so in the house, it was Yvette and 3 boys. And sometimes men aren't really great at expressing their emotions. So what we said we're going to do is, rather than try to search for an emotion, like I'm experiencing anger, frustration, or I'm sad, we just said, let's say yum or yuck. So if you're experiencing an emotion that is negative, we're going to call it yuck. And if it's a positive emotion, we're going to call it yum. And that was at least a place to start tapping into our emotions as men. And it worked. It's a really great place to start.
That's fantastic. I love that, how you took that. Now, you, in publishing your book, what method did you choose? And then what are some of the important lessons you learned during that process?
Wow. I'm publishing it through Amazon. So is that what you're asking? Yeah, so I'm using what they call the KDP, so the print on demand, and the other part of it, the lessons, just keep going. You just got to keep going, and that's what it was for me. It was every day writing down what my thoughts were, every day recording what my thoughts were, and then meeting with my buddy for about 2 hours. So there was a lot of work, and I just kept doing the work, and I kept making time to do the work. And I think that was the most important part. And that built a muscle that I didn't know I had, which is really cool. And now I have that, and I'm working on another book right now. So,
Martine, if you've been watching the show for the last several weeks, we've been talking about hashtag book talk, which has become a great way to get your book into the hands of young people. Are there any specific marketing strategies that you found successful, and maybe some things that you did for the marketing that didn't turn out so great?
I think one of the best strategies that I had is I created a podcast called the Curiosity Theory Hangout, and every week I would have 3 to 4 guests. So I would do and I'd create a conversation around curiosity, whether it was, working on your courage or, just different things. And I would curiously approach that conversation. And then that would in turn then have people that were connected to my guest. And I would then invite those people as part of the conversation. That was the first thing. I think the thing that didn't work is during the pandemic, I did not continue my classes. I didn't opt to do Zoom classes. And that was a big mistake, because I just started to do Zoom 2 months ago, and my workshops are blowing up right now.
That's fascinating. I love how you're able to look back and say, I should have done something differently during this time. So now I'm doing it now. And that's the point there, is that you're never too late. Yeah. Right. Because you just jump back into it right now, which is fantastic. What are some of the pieces of advice that you would give our audience in a minute or less, a piece of advice, like they're just getting ready to sit down and start writing that book? What would be, because I know just keep going, but what would be some advice that you would give them to maybe get themselves prepped to get started writing that first book?
I do something called morning notes, where I wake up every morning at 4:00. I meditate for usually about an hour, maybe an hour and 20 minutes. And then immediately I grab my laptop, which is right next to where my meditation pillow is. I have that ready, and I just get it and I put it on my lap, and I just start typing. And that's what I do. And that's how I've written a lot of the stuff that I've written. I call it my morning notes. So it's part of how I how I journal, but as well as the ideas in there are very rich because they come out, they show up after my meditation. So I would suggest to make it a practice, make it a ritual, how you write, and not be so worried about what you write. Just let it come out, and eventually you're building a muscle, and so eventually you're just writing, and it becomes a habit, and then it becomes part of your personality, and then it becomes part of your personal reality.
Oh, I like that, personality or personal reality. That is so good. Now, curiosity theory, I'm assuming it's all about curiosity, right? Which is,
Yes.
I actually know this because I've read your book and I've taken your courses. I do know this. So when you sit down there, you do that meditation, do you have questions that you ask yourself to help you with those writing prompts to get started?
So yes and no. I don't meditate for writing. I meditate for just building myself. Like, so working on something that I want to work on. And then I do have a meditation where I'm curious. I'm going into the meditation as a curious investigator, investigating what's happening with me and knowing what I want to work on. So there's a, and I have it actually on my window. So I'm working on being less idle and less inactive. So these are qualities I'm working on. So first, what I do is I start to work on the negative part, like what I don't like, the trigger. So I look at myself, and I do a lot, and so, but I'm very hard on myself. And what I'm noticing is those parts in my life that I'm idle, and then I'm inactive. And so I'm looking at those parts of my life, and then that's what I'm investigating in my meditation. So when I'm coming out of my meditation, I'm describing the feeling that I experience being idle, where it stops me, and how I want to be. And so then I'm creating a new character, if you will, or a new challenge, or a new kind of persona in myself that I'm going to be more of the direction that I want to be, that's going to heal whatever's behind being idle and inactive, and then going to move me forward so I can flourish in the direction I want to flourish.
Oh, that's fantastic. I absolutely love that. Martine, as you know, I have many, many more questions for you, but we're almost out of time here. But I do have one final question. How can we here at Bookish, how can we support you on what you're working on, and what other project do you have coming up?
Thank you. I think just being part of the community is a tremendous support. Just ever since I've gotten to know, each and everyone, and I'm getting to know more people at Bookish. It's just the energy. It's the energy that everybody has. It's the people that are very successful, and the people that are entering into their own future success. And I love being a part of that. So I think it's the community. The community is inspiring, and I think that's how you guys can support me and how you've been supporting me. And did you say what's next? Is that the other question?
Yeah. What's your next project?
So right now I've launched I have a men's only, which is called Men's Breakthrough Challenge. And that's a men's only version of the curiosity theory. And then what happened was a lot of the women that I know have said, hey, what about us? So I'm launching a women's class called the Curiosity Theory for Women. And, that's what I'm doing. And I'm really, really excited about the conversations that people are having. And when you create a safe and respectful and powerful place for people to talk, whether they're women or men, what comes out of them and how inspiring it is, and how resilient people are, and what they really, really want for their own lives. And that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm creating a space so that people can just speak their truth and live in their passion and live in their dreams.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks, Martine, so much for being here, for doing what you do to get that word of curiosity out there to help to make this planet a better place. When we come back next from our break, we're going to meet the next author, Sherri Leopold.
There was no rationale. You go where the story leads you. And in this case, I had no idea it was going to have a dark conclusion. You were mentioning before we got going, Salem's Lot. And when I started that story, I thought to myself, well, this will be the opposite of Dracula, where the good guys win. In this book, the good guys are going to lose, and everybody's going to become a vampire at the end of the book. And that didn't happen, because you go where the book leads you, and this one just led me into a very dark place. I didn't even want to go there. I want people to find it out for themselves. You never know. You never know. And sometimes it's a big and powerful machine. The best description of writing a novel that I ever heard It's actually in Thomas Williams's book, The Hair of Harold Rue, which is about a novelist trying to write a novel, and it just covers like 1 or 2 days in this process, and a lot of things happen to him. It's a fabulous book. But he says that writing a novel is like building a little campfire on an empty, dark plain, and one by one, these characters come out of the dark, and each one has a little pile of wood, and they put it on the fire, and if you're very lucky, before the fire goes out, it's this big bonfire, and all the characters stand around it and warm themselves. And that's the way it's always been for me. I have a good friend over in Vermont, John Irving, and John says that he always begins a novel by writing the last line. And to me, that's like eating your dessert before you eat the meal. And everybody works a different way, and God bless John, and he's done some wonderful work in his lifetime, and he'll probably do some more, but I could never write a book that way. The way that I think of it, is that fire. I love that particular image, but I've also always thought of it in terms of there's a little thread, a little red thread that goes into a hole in the baseboard, and you just start to pull it out, and you see what's on the other end of it, and sooner or later you get there. For me, the fun of writing novels isn't in the finished product, which I don't care about that much. There's a guy who was looking at my shelf over there. All the books are on the shelf, and to me, those are like dead skin, the things that are done. But I love the process. I tell the story to myself, and in a way, when the work is the best work, it's more like being a secretary than it is a creative person. You just sort of take this stuff down.
Welcome back. Here we are again at the Author's Corner, and we are really, really excited to have at Bookish Sherri Leopold. She is an author, a speaker, the CEO of Dream Big with Sherri Leopold, and the leader of the Stop Self-Bullying movement. She has authored 9 books, including 7 international best-selling books. Holy cow, Sherri, before we start getting into questions about your book, I have got to know about your passion behind the Stop Self-Bullying movement. Would you share that with our viewers?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. I think, I didn't know that's what I was going to be doing. I guess I'll preface it by saying that it all kind of fell out. I don't want to say on accident. It was probably, I don't know, maybe 40 years in the making, but I had a conversation with a friend who was just, I could see on her face that she was saying something. She wasn't speaking out loud. And it was really bothersome to me. And I actually said to her, why did you just say that to yourself? And she looked surprised and she said, what do you mean? And I said, why did you just say, I'm always going to be broken. I'm always going to be alone. I'm never going to be happy. And she just had this shocked look on her face. And I said, did you think you needed to say it out loud for me to hear you? And so we got up because I felt the energy was really heavy. So we got up and took a walk and talked and things, and it was better. But it was the very next day when I was in the car and the radio was on. I was on my way to a networking meeting, and I heard that Anthony Bourdain had committed suicide. It was only 3 days after Kate Spade. I literally had a conversation with God. I said, oh my God, this has to stop. And I turned the radio off, and I just felt a very urgent need to do something. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I just felt I needed to do something. And I had just done a first chapter in a collaborative book. I had just turned in the final draft. And so I was like, I'll write a book. And I was like, I have no idea what it's going to say. I mean, like, that's how it kind of evolved. It sort of just fell out. But I was like, I really thought about what is the common denominator between Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade. And I thought of my friend's face, and I thought, God, I don't want to get that call about her. But they have their dream jobs. They had more money than they could spend. But I thought, she doesn't live that life. And I'm like, what can I do to help stop this? But I had to think about what the common denominator was. And it dropped in. I said, it's what they say to themselves. And I literally tell you self-bullying, what to do when the bully is you, dropped in. Like I said, I called God to the passenger seat, apparently because the title, it was like I heard it actually literally with my ears. And then I felt like this sense of urgency to get it out. But I had no idea what was going to be in it. But I had the title, and the title never changed. So
that's interesting, because we talked about titles a couple of weeks ago and how they tend to morph, but that really stayed stagnant for you, which is so interesting. And I love this topic because there are so many people that really are not just their own worst critic, but are so mean to themselves, they would never play that on a loudspeaker. So what a very important cause and a book for you to share with the world. So I am excited to talk about wellness to winners and what inspired that book collaboration.
Sure. And that's actually my latest international best-selling book. And that's Wellness for Winners, was actually born of, kind of a conversation with Evan Trad, who is my co-founder of that book. And it actually started off with a different publisher, and that unfortunately that publisher passed away. And I kind of thought maybe the project was going to be dead, and reached out to Lynda Sunshine West, and she was able to help us get that done. And I'm so proud of this collaboration, because there are, I think, 13 or 14 first-time authors. And it's really about people who are winning their way and really creating wellness in their life on their terms. And it means so many things. So being in a health and wellness network marketing company really didn't have anything to do with it, except that I know that wellness is not just about physical, it's about emotional and mental and spiritual and financial and all those things. And I wanted people to stand up and share their stories of how they were winning and be that inspiration for those people who might read that and go, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Like, I can do that. That was what I wanted at the end, was for somebody to be able to say, I can do it too.
Hi, Sherri. My name is Tim. Nice to meet you. I want to take this opportunity as well to thank you and Martine for joining us on our call today. In fact, I love your topic. As I like to put it, the one person you spend the most time with is yourself. So if we can learn to be friends with ourselves, that's going to do great things. But I want to actually ask the same question we asked Martine. Most published authors at one point in time felt that their story was not important to write. What I wanted to ask you was, why did you feel that way, and how did you overcome that common hurdle?
You know, it's interesting, because when I was on that drive and that topic dropped in, I thought, oh my gosh, I share a vitamin supplement. I don't know how I'm going to help people. I'm like, it didn't make sense to me, but I felt such an urgent need to do it. I knew I had to figure it out. And when the title dropped in, I will say I stepped out in faith and said, I don't know what's going to be in the book, but I know it will be impactful. And I guess I couraged through it, honestly. And I also knew that it wasn't just going to be about my story and things that I had overcome, because my typical self-bullying actually is usually couched in humor, which is what I talk about in the book. Is especially for women, we'll say, oh, I wouldn't wear a bikini, people would run screaming. Like, that is self-bullying. It just is amusing, right? And misery loves company. So we want people to agree with us. So that is addressed in there. And that was actually mine. And I developed a technique called the SNAP technique so that I could help my own network and actually anyone else to create that ripple of blessings, which is to help you empower yourself, but also to teach your network, your friends, your kids, so that we can change this behavior. You never eradicate it, but you can get a handle on it. I help you snap out of it. How about that?
I'm over here snapping.
Yes, that's right. And just so you know, if you want to know, it's a series of 4 snaps on a non-dominant and dominant hand. It's speaking negatively attracts pain, and start now activating your power. And it's a snap on each one. And so when I snap, if you're my friend, if I snap, whatever's coming out of your mouth doesn't serve you. And it doesn't serve me to hear it. So it's an auditory thing without even saying anything to you to change what it is that's coming out of your mouth.
That's a beautiful way of even advocating for someone else. It's amazing. I'm really curious about your book in terms of how you decided to publish it. Could you share a little bit about that and what lessons you learned going through that process?
Sure. And I used Ingram Spark, which is basically through KDP and Amazon to do my personal book. And I've worked with Lynda Sunshine West on multiple books. I will tell you, it's sort of interesting having done collaborative books and your own book. It's just a very different experience. One isn't better than the other. They're just different. But I would just say that, you know, and I advocate this all the time. I really feel like if you want to share something, find a way to do a collaborative book first. The reason is because you'll get used to the process. You won't be so tied to having so many words, and you won't have to do every single piece. You'll learn what you need to know to do your own. I just really advocate for collaborative books first.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it as I'm going through that process myself.
Yeah, we love talking collaborations in this show, by the way. And as we mentioned to Martine, Book Talk has become a great way to get your book in the hands of young people. And we'd like to ask you as well, what marketing strategies have you found successful and what has not been successful?
So for young people, I have actually more targeted the parents. And the reason is this becomes a generational thing for self-bullying for sure. Because, you know, poo rolls downhill. Unfortunately, if a parent really does it a lot, they just ingrain it right into their children. So we have to start here with ourselves. And then we're able to teach our children to do better. Although I have given the book multiple times to teenagers because it's the hardest thing. And as parents, we really don't know how to navigate that very well. We always just say, well, stay away from them if somebody says something negative to them, right? We just don't know what else to say. And the thing is, that's really not a very good actionable step for a child to take. Sometimes they can't remove themselves in school from the situation. So we have to help them learn language that is more self-affirming. You know, is it true that I'm blank, blank, blank? You know, does it even matter to me? Blank, blank. You know, is it going to matter in 5 years? You know, we have to teach them the questions they have to ask themselves. That's how they're going to be empowered.
Oh, that is so, so true. Well, Sherri, I'm wondering, can you tell us in about 60 seconds or less, how can we here at Bookish support your mission and what other projects, and not what other projects, because you've shared some of them, and the other projects that you have in the works?
Sure. So anyone can join my collective group, which is War on Words. Wow, that's the word. Wow Warriors group on Facebook. And we talk about those sorts of self-bullying things in there. So I invite people to join me there. Also, my next upcoming collaborative book with Action Takers Publishing is actually Fabulous After 50. It is all about sharing your story, about walking in your purpose and living in your happy. It's not necessarily about money. It's about just being you and so happy in that time in your life where some people are thinking about sitting on the couch. I'm thinking about what can I do next? And that's the kind of people that are going to be in that book. It's going to be an inspiration overload of people who are doing just incredible things in the world. So I invite people to check out Fabulous After 50 on actiontakerspublishing.com and join me as an author because we are a fun bunch.
You sure seem like it. And I mean, the red lipstick says it all for me. You're my kind of girl.
That's right.
Thank you for being here, Sherri. We so appreciate it and you sharing our knowledge. When we come back from break, we're going to share our book recommendations for this week.
Hey, I always try to do one writer's question to get the insight from one of the greatest writers that ever lived. But you said that you never start a book without knowing how it's going to end. You also say that you chart out your book chapter by chapter. But if you individualize that chapter by chapter, how much do you have a entry point into the chapter and then an exit point, and then whatever comes, or you pretty much, how detailed do you get in your outline?
Well, the chapter outline is usually one paragraph. What's going to happen next? What's going to happen in this chapter? Or a couple of sentences, 3 sentences maybe. You do that to pacing is so crucial. I'm always concerned with pacing, and so to do that, you've got to know what's in the chapters and are they too long, too short, whatever. That's a constant challenge every day. Is how long do you keep a chapter? When do you break it up? When do you give the reader a break? When do you switch scenes completely or go to a different subplot? That's why the outlining is so important, because you got to work that stuff out ahead of time before you start the book. Because if you always know where you're going, it's hard to get lost. And writers are notorious for having a brilliant idea, jumping into the novel, writing like crazy for a year, and then realize they don't know where to go next, or what the end is, and they've written themselves into a corner. That is fairly common in this business, and I'm not going to do that. I want to know what the ending is, and so I keep the chapter summaries fairly succinct, and I'm always tinkering with them. Once I have the outline finished, it doesn't stay like that. I'll start the book. If the outline works, I'll start the book, but I'm always tinkering with the outline too. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and by the time it's finished, I can't even read the thing. It's so messy. But that's how I handle that.
Here we are. We're back. This is our part where I love this, because we're going to do a lightning round right now with our special guest that we had today, Martin and Sherri. So Martin and Sherri, I'm going to ask you a series of 5 questions, but I'd like you to answer in 10 words or less. Is this going to be challenging? Maybe not. I don't know. We're going to find out. You guys ready to get into it?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, I'm going to start ladies first. Okay, Martin, so ladies first. So Sherri, what time of the day do you usually write?
Usually it ends up being later at night when things are quiet for me.
That was like 11 words. Oh, that was 13 words. Just kidding. Okay, next up, Martin.
About 5 o'clock during my morning routine.
Okay, awesome. Now, Sherri, what is the most difficult part about writing for you?
I actually don't feel it's difficult ever. I just do it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Martin?
I would say repeating the same things over and over when I'm writing.
Oh, I tend to do that as well. I hear you. I hear you. So Sherri, okay, what would you say is your most interesting writing quirk?
Ooh, probably that I write like I speak.
Okay. Oh, interesting. I like that. Okay. Martin?
I would say that I get up really early in the morning to do it. I'm up at 4 o'clock to start my routine and then jump into it as quick as I can.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I'm not awake yet. But okay. So Sherri, do you often hear from your readers, and what do they say?
Yes. Mostly that I hear wow, which is a common word, wow, which really resonates with me anyway, because war on words, but yes.
Right. The wow warriors. Right. Exactly. And then Martin?
I hear from people daily as I'm constantly talking to people that have read the book and people that have gone through my courses. So daily.
What do they say?
They're always sharing how much curiosity has helped them break through, improve relationships, make more money.
Awesome. I think one of those was me who reached out to you and said that. Yeah, exactly. Sherri, what has changed your life in becoming a best-selling author?
I think just meeting just so many incredible people. That fills me up, and that has been the very best part for sure.
Martin?
I'd say being responsible for my philosophy, always staying curious, and that's
good. Yeah. It kind of reminds you to stay in check, right, with that, because when we're talking about our books, Sherri talking about the Stop Bullying movement, you talking about curiosity theory. Since you're constantly talking about it, it's always top of mind, and it's always something that you're working on. Well, I want to thank the both of you so much for your time, out of your busy schedule, to enlighten, encourage, and empower our bookish viewers. And we're going to next share our book recommendations. Thank you guys so much. Loved having you here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Often when I When I have the idea for a story, even I don't really know how it came, or I work it out years later. I understand what must have been going on in my subconscious. But this story actually had a very concrete jumping off point, which was that my son David, when he was tiny, his beloved toy was a pig. Now that pig wasn't called the pig, as the pig is in the story. That's the name is my invention. So he had this grubby little pink pig, which he still has, but which was always getting lost, just like Jack in the story. He was constantly hiding this pig. And I became panicky that one day he was going to lose this pig for good. So I bought a replacement and I hid it in a cupboard, which David then discovered when he was a toddler. He went to the cupboard, opened it up, and looked really confused as he found this second pig. And then he told me this was his pig's brother and kept it. So, that was just part of our family history, and the pig has always been part of our family. Or the two pigs have always been part of our family. And then I had this idea, I kept thinking about what it would be like to be the replacement toy, this second pig. And out of that grew the story of the Christmas pig. So all of the incidents in the book are fictional, but the original idea of the two pigs came from a real pair of two pigs.
And we are back. As you know, if you're a regular viewer of the show, every week we give you our book recommendations for the week and why we love them. I'm going to start with a book called Revolutionary Road by Richard Yates. Richard Yates, one of those kind of unsung heroes of writing. He is so smart and good. I'm going to read just a taste. I want to read more, and then I'm going to tell you very briefly why I love him. They could have wept with relief. Instead, trembling, they cheered and laughed and shook hands and kissed one another. And somebody went out for a case of beer, and they all sang songs around the auditorium piano until the time came to agree unanimously that they'd be better knock it off and get a good night's sleep. See you tomorrow, they called, as happy as children, and riding home under the moon, they found that they could roll down the windows of their cars and let the air in, with its health-giving smells of loam and young flowers. It was the first time many of the Laurel players had allowed themselves to acknowledge the coming of spring. And what I love about that is that he writes in third-person plural. Nobody does that. And it's just a taste of one of the kinds of things. It's a voicing that people tend to not use. But the whole book is fantastic. It eventually became, I believe, a Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio movie. But the writing is superb throughout. And he kind of tells the same story in every book, but he's absolutely worth the read. Richard Yates, remember him. And let's move on to Paula, who's got a new book for us this week.
I'm really excited about this book. I've read it several times, and I highly recommend it. It's called Digital Minimalism, and it's all about choosing a focused life in a noisy world, which is the subtitle by Cal Newport. This book really stemmed from his idea and his resolution from getting curious, which has been a theme here today. How much he was using his cell phone, how much the habit was that he kept picking it up, looking at notifications, being behind the screen, constantly being connected to a device in some way. And it talks about his principles of how you are cluttering your life and your brain and your time and your attention with this thing that was meant to connect us in some way, and learning how to optimize the use of digital devices and choose to use them in an intentional way that doesn't suck your time away, but does allow you to stay connected with intentionality. So I encourage you to go grab this book and read it. It's a really short read, but it's going to change the way you think about being connected digitally.
Awesome. So let me go on to my book. First of all, I think we've had a great show today, guys. So this has been a lot of fun. I have estimated that I have read probably about 1,000 books in my adult life, and by far the biggest genre are business books, but most of them are individual stories. This is actually, I believe, one of my favorite business books that I've ever read. This is actually about the history of the oil industry. In fact, from the founding of oil in Titusville, Pennsylvania in the late 1860s. What's interesting about the beginning of the industry was the car wasn't around. It was actually developed for lighting before the electric light bulb was around. It's a great example of how you never see opportunities until they come. But from the discovery to J.D. Rockefeller, to the development in our country of the oil industry, to the discovery in the Middle East, it's a great book to get your head around the overall oil industry, how it's developed, how it's evolved over time. I was absolutely fascinated and excited about the entire writing of this book. So anybody wants to read something about business, this is an awesome book to read, and I would highly recommend anybody to pick up this book. It's not a short read, but it's a great read.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. And unlike Tim, I have not read thousands of books in my adult life. I actually was never a reader until age 51. That's when I started reading. And one of the books that I read towards the beginning of my transformational journey, which happened through reading books, by the way, was tremendous. One of the books I read that had a pivotal moment in my life is called The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. This book literally put me on a path of self-responsibility. I spent so many years of my life blaming others for my misfortunes and giving credit to others for things that I did well. And I never took responsibility for the good or the bad. So this book, I opened it up, and the very first principle in this book, there's 100 of them. The very first principle in this book is take 100% responsibility for your life. And all I needed to do was read the title of that chapter. And I said, uh-oh, I've never done this before. And so, of course, I read the whole book and really got into it. And this was one of those just instrumental pieces of that moment that I needed in my life in order to put me on a completely different trajectory. I've transformed my life 100%. And it only took about a year of really working on myself to get that momentum going so that I would become the person I am today. The Success Principles, highly recommended. I had an opportunity to sit with Jack Canfield, 2 hours of one-on-one lunch with him was amazing. That was after I read his book. And so I highly recommend this book for anybody who's trying to find out who they are. Who am I? Where's my place on this planet? Really get this book and just check it out and dive into those principles and then start living those principles.
Radical responsibility. What a cool theme. And I mean, it really is all about self-leadership. I love all of these books. You guys are great. My pile and my list is just growing and growing. My husband's going to stop the Amazon guy from coming and delivering things soon. Well, we're so glad that you were here today. We encourage you, our viewers, to not just limit yourself to one category of book or literature, because you don't know what you don't know. So you might have a passion to read, but if you've only had limited exposure to one genre, then you might wind up reading in an area or even writing in an area that doesn't suit your skills. So continue to read from a variety of literary categories and allow yourself to be inspired by new voices and new ideas.
Thank you for joining us on Bookish Talk. We sincerely hope that something we said encouraged, enlightened, or empowered you to begin your journey to write your legacy book. Be sure to join us on Bookish Club and begin to journey to journal. Tune in next week when we will share some tips on writing more on your book. Visit our website at www.thrivingwomen.com. And of course, subscribe and leave questions. You never know when it's going to be on our show. And we look forward to seeing you soon next week.